Hey, today I'm just going to show you how I did this on my couch to cover a couch scratch. Alright, so I'll just talk you through the materials that I used to be able to complete this project. So I used some fabric scissors, even though you could definitely use embroidery scissors, and I'm sure that that would be a better option if you have access to them. I've got two sewing needles. These ones I previously already had, but you can always buy them and they're only about $4 for 4 needles. Then I've got some pliers, I've got a thimble, and my thimble is a porcelain one, just to be able to help me push through the thread, but I didn't use this the first time that I did that, so it's not needed unless you really want to buy one. Then I've got my cotton embroidery floss, so this one is the Moline series 8mm ones. So I have these different colors, so you can see the numbers here if you would like to be able to see what colors they are. So because of all of this floss, it did cost me roughly about $17 to be able to create. If I had to buy my needles as well, then it probably would have cost me about $21. It did take about 10 hours for me to complete as well, but just as a heads up, I am just a beginner. I'm not a professional, so if you have any sewing knowledge, I'm sure it'll be a lot quicker. Alright, so the next thing that we have to do is we have to plan and prep. So what I would like to do is I like to start my vine down the bottom here with the dark green, and then go up and then loop it around and then swoop it back up here. Then what you can see is that I have all of this floss here. That is not exactly going to help me. I'm not going to be able to put my hand in because I have all of this. So I'm going to trim any of this excess here. And as you can see here, it's frayed, but it's not open. So all I will do is grab my scissors and then I'll put a bit of pressure along here and then just cut that open to be able to reseal later. Alright, so as you can see, hopefully I've just tidied up some of these edges. So I haven't tidied it up fully, so we will go through and we will trim some of that stuff when we're actually going through and doing the embroidery. But you want to make sure that you don't have anything in the way like this one here, because you want to be able to put your hand in one side and in the other side. So there shouldn't be anything stopping you from putting your hand in either side. So now all we have to do is we have to thread the needle with our floss. So we just put it through and I loop it over and then we tie it together. I'll just quickly show you how I do it. Alright, so all you have to do to thread a needle is I actually like to wet this because sometimes it frays. But then all you do is you put it between your two fingers and you kind of peek out the thread a little bit. And you just place your needle on top and then you thread it through like this. Then all you do, or what I like to do, is I actually put this into my couch and just make sure it's in the middle of my two threads. And then all I do is I tie my two threads together at the ends. And the way I do that is I just do like a loop that looks like a ribbon, and then I put the end through that middle loop there to make myself a knot. So now that I have my floss threaded, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my cat, sorry for my cat, into 4. So I'm going to have this first section that my vine is going to go up to here, from here. So it's going to go up here, and then I'm going to have a bigger vine going around, and then a bigger vine going around, and to the end here. So I'm going to have it as like kind of, that's a section, and that's a section. So to begin with, I'm just going to focus on down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, okay, I want it to be there. So I think that nice little bell would probably be about here. So I'm going to grab my floss and I'm going to start from the very under part that I can get. And I'm going to push my needle through and then I'm going to pull it all the way. So we can cut this off later, so then don't worry about that at the moment. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a simple, I'm going to go, sorry, put my needle back through, and I'm just going to go through and push back up like this. So I've gone through and I just put my thread at the bottom here, and then I'm going and working my way over. So what you have is, see how I have one stitch and then I've got my tail end here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to the very beginning stitch here, and then I'm going to push my needle through there. So then it's going to look like it's one consistent line instead of just being like a gap and then line and then gap. Like so. So I thought I'd just give you a bit of a closer up, a more close view of what I'm doing. So as you can see, I've just gone through once and then I'm going back to the same spot that it's going in with the thread here, and then I'm pushing it through, and then I'm going out the other side. Sometimes it can be a bit fiddly to try and grab the needle. Like so. So now I've finished this little part here. So I have my thread on the inside. So as you can see, that stitch is going from the inside. And then what I'm going to do is I am just going to cut the thread here, and then I'm going to tie it off. So if you would like, you can repeat that same thing that we just did to be able to make this a bit thicker, so then you can have a bit more of a base of a vine, or you can just leave it as a single stitch and then start to get thicker over this side. Alright, so what we have to do is we take our floss and our needle and we go on the underside of our fabric, and then we choose where do we want to have our rose. So I'm going to have my rose close to this one. As you can see, this is the completed rose. So what we do is we go through, and then what we're going to do is just do a simple stitch, and we're going to pretend that there's like a circle around, and we're just going to do 5 what's called anchor stitches. So we go 1. Now we don't want these to be too tight because you want to be able to fit your needle through later on. See, like this. So there's 1, and then we're going to go back into the middle. They can be close, they don't have to be exactly in the same spot, but they just want to be close. Then we have 2, and we're going to do 5 of these. So back into the middle. They don't have to be the exact same length if you don't want to. We're just going to be able to cover that up with some of the vines or some of the leaves, etc. Alright, so now we have our 5 anchor stitches, and remember, you just want to make sure that you can fit your needle underneath all of these because we're going to go through in a minute. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back through, and you want to come up on one of the sides that you would like to start, and you want to be nice and close to the middle. So see how that one just pulled? So you just got to be careful that you still have a bit of wiggle room. So all we're going to do, and this is super easy, is we're just going to go over and under. So we're going to go under this one here, as you can see, as our first thread. So we're going to go under this one. You just pull your needle through. Like so. Then we're going to go over this one and under this one. We're going to go over this one, under this one. And so it should start to basically be a bit of a weave. And so it should alternate. So see, I've already gone under this one. So we're going to go over it now. And we're going to go under the next one. And we're going to do this until our rose is the size that we like, or we can't see the thread anymore of our anchor stitches. Alright, So as you can see, I filled out most of the other ones. So this one was a little longer and this one was a little longer, but the other ones are pretty much covered up. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your leftover thread and you're going to try and cover these. So the way we do that is we're just going to do a normal stitch, but we're just going to keep it nice and close. So we're going back into the inside of our fabric and we're pulling that through. So our aim is to kind of like have the end pieces of it. So once you've gone through once, you want to go through in the same spot or similar spot to where you were before. And you want to go through and you want to try and cover any of those anchor stitches that we just made. So now that I've done my rows here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my needles are through the inside of it. And so as you can see, I have my needle here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my thread. I like to leave a little bit longer just so then I can cut it down shorter after I've done my knot. So then I just do a simple knot, just like the first 2 strands of your shoelace. And I just do that twice and just tighten it up on the inside. Then I just cut off the remainder and then my rose is done. So I'm going to do a lazy daisy stitch, but as you can see, when I hold my 2 sides together, I have my vine going up here, and as I said, I only want to have like a section that's probably about up to here. So on the other side of my couch, I put a lazy daisy roughly here. Now we don't want to use, see all this frayed material here? This is not going to hold any of our stitches, but see how I have this part here that these threads are kind of loose and they kind of look a bit ratty. So because of that, I think I'm going to place my lazy stitch here. Alright, so as I said, I'm going to do a lazy daisy stitch, and so as surprisingly it's going to be a daisy. So what you have to do is, again, you start with your needle on the underside here, and then what you're going to do is you're going to pretend that there is a circle. So this one I like to have a bit of a larger circle. So I put my needle through and I pull it all the way. Then what you're going to do is you're going to figure out how wide you want your petals. So I'm not going to want mine too wide at the moment, so I'm going to make it about that, as you can see there. So I'm going to pull my needle through, but I'm not going to pull it all the way. So see how I still have this loop? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide the height of my lazy daisy, and I reckon it's probably only going to be about here. So I'm going to put my needle through here, and I'm going to have that go through that loop. So then when I pull, it forms a petal, okay? And then what we do is we just do a little anchor stitch here, so we can hold that petal in place, okay? You got to make sure that it stays in place. Like so. Alright, and then you can fiddle with that little bit of shape there. Then what we do is we can repeat that in a bit of a circle. So we go through, we go the space that we want to have our petal, and we hold on to that thread, and then we go to our petal length, and it goes through that loop. And then we just do a little stitch at the top to hold it in place. And then we do that all the way around. Alright, so this is the base of the lazy daisy, but what I did last time is I added in some extra stitches around here, just so then it was a bit more full. And then what I did is I just did a simple stitch going from the top to the bottom with a dark blue, just to outline it a bit more. So if you want to be able to do like I've done here, all I've done is I put my needle through the base of one of the other lazy daisy stitches that I've done, and then I'm just putting it through the middle of another one, so then they join up as a petal. Like so. so, and then all I'm doing is I'm choosing the space in between those two petals, like here, to be able to create my new petal, like so. So now that the outline of my flower is done, what I've done is I've just threaded my needle to the yellow, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go from the underside, and I'm just going to basically do like a satin stitch, so like just like that simple stitch we did earlier, and I'm just going to go across until I fill in basically a circle. So as you can see, that's when I have my lazy daisy done, and I have just added the middle in. I'm not going to show you guys how to do the outline, but if you wanted, you just do a little stitch from the base here to the top, and you can just outline however many petals you would like. Okay, so what you can see I've done here is I've started to move on to the next step, which is adding in the vine. So what I've done is I joined these sections, so I held these together so then I could see where would my vine be running. And then all I've done is I've just done a simple stitch to be able to see and like do an outline of my vine. So the way that I did that, and what I'm going to be doing now, is I'm going to be going through and I'm going to make my vine outline, and then I'm going to fill it in. So the stitch that you have to do is, again, you start along here and you go through, and because I'm doing an outline, I'm just going to start making it a bit bigger, so I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap there. So I pull through, and then you do a simple stitch, so you go just forward however much, you pull it back through on the underside, and now the difference that you have is that you're going to go through with your needle and you're going to go halfway through the stitch that you just made, and you're going to have your needle go through there to then go forward to your next stitch. So normal stitch, and then the starting point is back halfway through your thread. Okay, because if you have it at the very beginning of your thread, then it is likely to come out, and then you're not going to have as nice of a stitch. Alright, so as you can see now I've done my outline, so even like one of this didn't work too well, but that's okay, we can fix that up with a leaf. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill in our outline. So the way that we do that is we just take our thread like we did before, and you know how we did the middle of this lazy daisy? We're going to do the exact same thing. So what we do is we go down to the bottom here and we start from the inside and we thread our needle through. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to do a simple stitch up until a certain amount. I like to try and roughly keep them about even, and I pull that through. Then I go back to the base here, so sometimes this material can be a bit tough when you're going near the joint. That's why the thimble's really good. And then we just go back up to that same level that we just did that stitch, and we just go all the way across. And then after we've gone all the way across, then we start a new row from here, and then we go up and we do that all the way up our vine. Alright, so since we have filled in all of this, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at doing some leaves. So what I do is I take my needle, I go from the underside, and as I said, I had this little bit where I messed up a bit, so I'm going to start there. So I'm going to put my needle in, and I'm just going to choose a little place in the trunk. Pull it through. And then there's a few options of what you could do. There's a whole bunch of videos in that of different people who make different types of leaves. But what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to do a little bit of a stem. And as you can see, I have a little bit of a gap there, which I'll need to fill in. And I'm just going to use that same stitch that we did the outline with. To be able to create just a little bit of a stem. Alright, so as you can see, I still have some of these threads that still need to be put down, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go just slightly off the top of that point, and I'm going to put it through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, if you can see, I'm just going to try to go a slightly back from that stitch that I just made. Then I'm going to do the same thing but on the other side. So I'm kind of creating like a V shape. Go through, and then I'm just going to go slightly under that stitch as well. And as I pull it through, you'll start to see that a leaf is starting to take form. And then you can just do that on both sides until you get the size that you want. So if you wanted a larger leaf, you'd be able to do larger strokes, or stitches, sorry. And if you wanted a smaller leaf like this one, then you just need to do probably only about 5 or so of these in total. And so I'm just going to go through and I'm going to add any leaves that I think that I want, but I'm going to leave a bit of this open space in the middle here because I'm going to use the green to go through and probably wrap up here. So I'm going to add probably a stem down here and add some leaves, and I'm going to do the exact same stitch that we did for the outside of here, and I'm going to add in one here, and I might do a leaf in the middle here by just doing that same thing of making one stitch in the middle and then doing one stitch on one side going in just below that stitch on the other side and creating that V shape going in. Okay, so now that I've done some little vines and some leaves out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of my small flowers. So what I've done is I've changed to this wonderful purple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the inside and see how I have this little V shape here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a very similar thing to the leaf, where I'm going to go through with my colour from the inside. And I'm going to go to the edge of this here. And I'm going to pull all the way through, like so. And then I'm literally just going to do the same thing where I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to put it right next to it in kind of like a V shape again, and then I'm going to try and go into the exact same spot where I was last time with my other one. So we want this to end up looking like a bud. And if you want it to be a little bit more thick, you can just keep going over it until you're happy with it. But just going from one side to another and then trying to go into a very similar space at the base of it. Like that, and then you can just keep adding. So for me, I'll probably just add it so it's a little bit more round, so I might do a few more stitches here. Alright, the next simple one that we're going to do is called a French knot. So all you're going to do is you're going to go through your fabric, and then what you're going to do is you're going to do 3 wraps with your thread. Now I think I found that it was easier to do it at the end of my fabric, out of my thread, because when you pull through, you're trying to get those loops to stay there. Like so. This is not the best one in the world, but at least it's the way how you do it. So you need to just go through, and then when you are wrapping, you just wrap 3 times, and you try and hold that tension as you go through a very similar spot to be able to create a little French knot like this. And this is what I use a lot of the time to be able to fill in a whole bunch of space. So when I do my green one going through, my light green, I'll probably add a whole bunch of little French knots just to be able to help myself out. I guess what I would mention as well, so if you have a look at my original one, these are just like the anchor stitches that we did in the roses, but they're closer together and there's only 4 of them. So they're super simple to do, and you can have them in a little pattern like this, or otherwise you can have them just spread out throughout your design like this one here. Alright, so now that I've added some of my different flowers to it, and as you can see, here's a better example of a French knot. Sorry, this one wasn't very good. But what I've done now is I have changed my thread over to the light green. So something to remember is that I made my stem here all of my light green. So that means that these ones that are going to be coming out, these vines, they don't actually need to like curve back into here unless you really want to. So what I like to do is I like to have them kind of come out and then just kind of like make a point and then just add however many flowers I want. So all I'm going to do now is going to do the exact same kind of stitch again, where we go through near the base, and then I'm going to go make one stitch, and then I'm just going to go halfway through that stitch and then continue along, and then I'm only probably going to do this one too wide. I'm not going to make it as thick as these ones, so I'm probably just going to do this twice and just follow along the same path. And then I might add in some little leaves and different things, and as I said, I really like having those French knots along this light green because I think it looks really stunning. And I'm just going to make it go to a point and have it placed wherever I feel it would be great. Alright, so I'm just going to say that this is roughly done for the moment. I'm actually just going to show you how to do your main stem, but I would normally go through and I'll add a few more flowers, and I probably add quite a few more little French knots because, as I said, I think that they're adorable. But when we start moving on to the main stem, please make sure that you are happy with everything on both sides of your couch before you start doing this main stem, because as soon as you go into your main stem and you start sewing this up, it means that you're not going to be able to get as far underneath your fabric, or you're not going to be able to get there at all. So make sure that you're happy with how many like vines are coming out and all the flowers and where they're placed, and you're just finalized everything on both before you start doing this section. Alright, so for being able to sew up the main part, there's going to be a little bit of work. So I would really recommend to have a thimble on, and also to have a set of pliers if you have to go through wire. So this one here has wire in it, but I'm actually going to be sewing around this, so it's not going to be too bad on this side. But as I got up higher, you can see the frayed part here. So I'd actually maybe have to go through this, which means that I would really need my thimble and my pliers because it becomes really hard to sew through. So what we have to do is we're going to use our thread, and we're going to go down to the bottom here, and we're going to place our needle through close to the opening and pull it all the way through. Now please remember, don't actually go on any of that frayed material because it won't hold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and hold my two sides together, and then I'm going to get my needle and I'm going to stitch through and make sure that I'm going through both sides of my fabric, and then I'm going to pull through. Now you can do what's called a blanket stitch here if you want to. So a blanket stitch is when you go through and you actually just loop this through, and then you have it together like that to be able to hold it together. And so I just make sure that I pull it really tight, and then I just go through and I start doing the next one. So as I said, it can be really difficult to be able to push through. So I would really recommend either a thimble or pliers. As you can see, I'm struggling at the moment to try and get it through. And then if you wanted, you can go through and you can do that blanket stitch again to be able to just go through that loop that you created. And then all you do is you just keep on going all the way up to the top, and you just try and make sure that you leave as little gap as you can. Otherwise you can do like a satin stitch, which is just like when you go through and then you just don't do that loop, you just keep going round and around, and you do that all the way up to the top, and then you'll be done. So if you do give this a try, can you send me a photo, because I would be super excited to see your work. Hope it helps.